All right, let's bring in tonight's panel. Sky News contributor Kosha Gada and political commentator Jason Morrison here in Sydney. Welcome to you both.
G'day.
Now, let's start with the Republican debate. Donald Trump, as we mentioned a moment ago with Adam Crichton, didn't join the first Republican debate. Instead, he did an interview with Tucker Carlson. We'll have a look at what he had to say in just a minute. Jason, you watched his interview. What did you make of it?
Well, yeah, I was probably going to be the majority of Americans because I think more people would have watched the online version than they will have watched the television version of it, sadly. The interview that Trump did, once again, you just reinforce the guy has a fearlessness about him. He called, and you know, there's not my language for a change, it's his language. He called bullshit on the accusations that have been put at him and what they're about and what the game is. And I would imagine most people who tuned in who were supporters of him probably look at it and say, well, that's exactly truly what it is. He's straightforward, straight talking, appealing attribute to a large bank of Americans. He just ticked the box with that, and he probably thought, and very wisely, well, he wasn't going to get a chance to do that if he sat in that panel with so many other people. Wise choice. Or
maybe he'd be attacked if he actually had to debate the other candidates. This is what he said about why he didn't join the debate with the other Republican candidates.
The polls have come out, and I'm leading by 50 and 60 points, and you know, some of them are at 1 and 0 and 2. And I'm saying, do I sit there for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it's going to be, and get harassed by people that shouldn't even be running for president? Should I be doing that?
How do you argue with that?
Well,
that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Kosha Gada, do you think he was trying to avoid scrutiny, avoid having to answer what were quite hard questions? I mean, when you looked at that debate on Fox News, the candidates were quite tough against each other.
Yes, I don't think so. If there's one thing I think most people would agree about Donald Trump, whether they love him or hate him, it's he is not somebody who shies away from scrutiny or tough questions. I think he thrives on it. He loves being adversarial with the media, including Fox News anchors. I think what he said there is really the reason. It was a strategic calculation. He's 40-plus points ahead in the lowest poll that he's in, as high as 60 or 70%. So I really think it was a power move. It was kind of like you minions go fight it out for who might be the faraway runner-up or potential vice presidential candidate, and he's out there doing something on a completely different playing field that the other folks can't come even close to.
But the plus side was it did give everyone else a good look at the other candidates without the distraction of Trump. You know, are there any other candidates in the field who've impressed you?
Well, that's probably the point, is that, I mean, the only names that you can kind of remember from that collection of 8 there are people that were well known anyway, and all the rest were just vying for a bit of attention. Real good moment in it was when they said, okay, let's say Trump gets picked as the candidate, how many of you would back him? And there were 4 that shot their hands up almost immediately. There was one other that looked around and said, oh, geez.
Yeah, that was Ron DeSantis. He was looking around before he kind of slowly raised his hand to say, yes, he'd support Trump.
So he got, we'll say 4.5 out of 8, which is probably all you want from that room. Yeah. And those 4 were looking for the vice presidential opportunity.
No, exactly. Kosha Gada, what do you think about any other candidates? And, you know, if Trump does end up in prison, you know, is Ron DeSantis still the person who shone today? Adam Crichton said he was impressed by Vivek Ramaswamy. What do you think?
I think so. I think Vivek is probably the breakout star in this, but not so much for his electability or how realistic it is that he would actually win the nomination or the presidency. I don't think anybody thinks that yet. But the purpose he's serving, the role he's serving is very important in that he is really widening the conversation and challenging a lot of orthodoxies in the Republican Party. Any issue where there's a break between sort of the populist wing and the establishment wing, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's thoughts on abortion, whether it's how much to trust government, whether it's election integrity, those kinds of lightning rod issues, he goes straight to it. He's very articulate, and he sort of forces the conversation. That, in that sense, he's playing an important role, and I think he was probably the breakout star.
And it's kind of interesting how Christie has now turned out to almost look like a bit of a goose when he once upon a time used to be one of the great hopes. So, you know, I don't think this says plenty about either how he's moved or how the Republican Party's moved, but he just looks like an also-ran now.
It is so fascinating watching the debate as an Australian, and it makes you realise how much more moderate our views are here than in the US.
And the people who put themselves up for election in Australia too, like they're Mogadon characters versus the people on that stage today.
Well, yeah, well, they were all more impressive than our politicians overall.